and for mine as well. We're going to restart Siman Kuf Yud Bet. You can pull up a Shulchan Aruch. You can share. I don't know. This also has it. This should be fine as well. Kuf Yud Bet. Siman Kuf Yud Bet. You're all the way in the beginning of the book. And what we're starting with is the halachot of. Okay, so the introduction. We gave this introduction last time. We'll give it again, just so everybody can get on the same page. We'll start off this way. We already know, and it's been made clear to us by the world at large, that no. I was going to put something here just to make it flatter so they see me better. That there's a big difference between Jews and non-Jews. That is clear. And we spoke about it a lot. And in an effort to make sure that Jews and non-Jews don't end up intermarrying and assimilating, Chachamim put in certain gezerot, certain decrees to keep us away from them and them from us, to make some sort of distinction. Famously, everyone knows that if we don't make Kiddush, then the Goyim make Havdalah for us, right? You've heard this one, right? They make Kaddish ourselves, make ourselves holy and sanctifier, then the Goyim come and they make a Havdalah between us, a separation between us and them. And throughout the generations, there have been times of assimilation, usually when it's good times, when the economy is good. So the Chachamim came and put certain gezerot. One of them we're going to start today is the gezerah of pat akum, of bread of a god. Now, obviously, if you go into a guy's house and he cooks you something up, of course it's going to be usher, right? Because his pots and pans were probably used within 24 hours. And all the bliot that are in there, it's going to make the food non-kosher. However, the understanding is that in the olden days, at least, bread was a very simple way to make. You took flour, water, maybe eggs. I don't know what else they put in, maybe a little sugar, salt, whatever it is. Very simple, basic ingredients. They were definitely kosher. And so the bread can be technically with kosher ingredients, but Chachamim came and said that if Goyim made bread, even if it's kosher, it's considered pat akum, and we can't eat it. What's the reason? The reason is the Gemara says chatnut, which means intermarriage. Because one of the main things that people sit around in order to socialize, other than alcohol, is also bread, right? Breaking bread. That's the lashon, right? You break bread. So if you break bread with a guy, you're gonna come to enjoy his company, and then eventually marry his daughter marry your son, and your son marry his daughter, back and forth, and it'll become to assimilation. So Pat Akum was put into place. Now, since the Chachamim put this Gezerah in place, the Chachamim can come and say which criteria can be met in order for it not to be considered Pat Akum, right? Fine, that's one. That's what we're going to deal with today. Another form of forbidden food is Bishul Akum. Okay, cooking of a guy, and we'll figure out as time goes by what that means and how far it goes. But just to understand, that means if a guy walks into your house, takes a kosher pot. If a guy walks into your house, takes a kosher pot, takes kosher ingredients, separates meat and milk, doesn't mix them together, and cooks them in your pot, that food is considered asur, and the pot is asur. You have to do hagat kelim on the pot.
Even boiling water?
We'll have to deal with water. It has to be something that's oila shulchan malachim, as well as not eaten raw. So perhaps water not. But technically, if they came and they took an egg and they cooked an egg in your pot, the egg is asur, pot is asur, everything asur. Right. Your pot, your egg, everything is yours because a guy touched it. Bishul Akum. That's, by the way, one of the reasons that if you know someone has a live-in nanny that's a goya, we highly recommend not eating in their house because the live-in nannies or live-in aides, whatever they are, they get hungry during the day when no one's there. So they take a pot and they cook something, and you don't know the wiser, or someone doesn't know halachot, let them do it. And the next thing now, the oven is asur, everything is asur.
I saw them cooking dinner for the family.
So then the question is, Ashkenazim, if they put on the fire, then it's already considered not Bishul Akum anymore. We'll get to that all in that time. But a lot of times don't know that, and they just let them turn on the fire and let them do everything, and the whole thing becomes terif. Everything becomes asur there. So that's another thing, Bishul Akum. Another Gezeirah Chachamim put into place, which we mentioned already, is the alcohol of Goyim. Not to drink in their company, not to drink in their bars. So a social drinking of alcohol with Goyim is asur. That means going to a holiday party where they have
office party.
Holiday office party where they have alcohol. Most companies don't allow alcohol on premises, but let's say this company does. Or they go to a bar, okay, or something like that, and they have kosher wine, kosher beer. It's asur to drink that beer there. It's asur. Because you're socializing with Goyim when you're drinking it.
So the makom is asur, or
drinking there is asur. Same thing. That there was a story. We're going to learn this as we go on, but there was a time when they were making a parlor meeting for a yeshiva, and they invited some wealthy Goyim who were going to donate money as well from the state and stuff like that. And Rav Moshe said you can't serve alcohol there because the Goyim came to a Jewish man's house. But since they're socializing at a table, you cannot serve alcohol there. Is that so?
belongs to the Jew.
Belongs to the Jew, Jew's house, but since Goyim are sitting there, it's going to become problematic.
What about the
Food's already a different story. Food's a different story. By the alcohol, it's the drinking. The food is the cooking. It's different.
No, but you're not allowed to cook for them either.
Why can't you cook for them?
No, you're not allowed to cook for them.
Why not? No, I'm sorry saying cooking for them. Right. So we're saying that remember the Chachamim put the Gezeirot, right? So Chachamim said the cooking of a guy is asur, the drinking with a guy is asur. So the different steps of what's asur. Yain Nesach is also asur. Well, that's a different story. And then the fourth Gezeirah that we're going to come to in Machot Asurot is milk and cheese of goyim. Okay, milk and cheese of goyim is another Gezeirah Chachamim put into place. And we're going to have to go through all of them. We're going to have to see what the halacha is and how it's applicable. So now we're going to start with the lashon of the Shulchan Aruch. If you open up Siman Kuf Yud Bet, and it says as follows. Take a look at the Shulchan Aruch. He says as follows: Asur chachamim le'echol pas shel amimim. The chachamim made it asur to eat the bread of the nations, ovdei kochavim, of idol worshippers. So everyone has a question about this. Ovdei kochavim. There are some goyim who are worse than idol worshippers. They're barbarians. They kill people, and they don't officially serve avodah zarah, right? They have Allahu Akbar. Okay. So lashon of the Shulchan Aruch is Pachil Amim Oivdei Kachavim, which means those who serve avodah zarah, they're not serving avodah zarah. So is their bread mutter? So so they bring down that Oivdei Kachavim. If you take a look at the Sifsei Das on the page, he writes over there, Af Kuti, She'ein Oved Oivdei Kachavim Pito is Aser. The reason will be is even a Kuti who doesn't serve with the Zara, right? He's like he thought he was Jewish, whatever it is. Maybe he didn't serve with the Zara. But even if someone is not serving with the Zara, what's the reason? Because look at the next two words in the Shulchan Aruch, Mashum Hatnut, because of intermarriage. Are you allowed to marry an Arab girl? A Muslim girl? No. Tasum. So the lashon of the Shulchan Aruch of Oivdei Kachavim is lav dafka. Not necessarily has to be an idol worshiper. it has to be because of Mashum Hatnu. So based on this, the question is, you're telling me because of intermarriage, what about this guy doesn't have any girls? He's a priest in the Catholic Church who officially is not married and doesn't have children officially. Okay. So maybe I can sit and eat his bread because there's no worry of chatnut there, and he doesn't have a girl for me to marry. So says the Ramah, "Vafilu b'makom deleka mishum chatnut asur." Even when there is no isser of chatnut, even when there is no in this specific place, there is no chance of you marrying his girl or some female relative of his. Still, it's asur, and the reason is it's a light plug. We're not going to make a difference. Like if you take a look at the Taz, when Taz says "Kigayin she'ein loy bonim," the light plug rabbanon, the rabbanon didn't make a difference. It becomes usher to eat the bread of a guy. Okay, the bread of a guy doesn't matter if he's an idol worshiper, even that's the language here, is usher because of intermarriage. So any guy that's usher to marry, you can't, which is all guy, so you can't eat their bread. What about if it doesn't have a daughter? It doesn't make a difference. Guy, you cannot marry a guy. You cannot eat their bread. Can you marry Bnei Noach? Can a Jew marry a non-Jew? Is it mutar to marry a non-Jew? A Bnei Noach is a non-Jew. No, so you cannot marry a Bnei Noach. So it becomes us. So if you take a look on top, it says Sifsei Kohen. So Sifsei Kohen is the Shach, known as the Shach, and the Turizov, that's the Tats. Right. It's a very nice story with the Taz. Maybe at the end, if we have some time, we'll get into the beautiful story of the Taz. Okay. Not to say there's no stories with the Shach, none of them come to mind at the moment. Okay. Now.
Your father-in-law and son-in-law, right?
Were they?
Yeah. So
sure. Yeah.
The way I remember is which one is the older one, which is the younger one.
Yeah.
Is the one that's closer, that's inside, that's the Rashi one, right? The Rashi was before Tosfot.
So the Taz.
Now I remember that who's older and who's younger.
So the Taz is older, you're saying?
Yes. That's the father-in-law and that's the son-in-law.
Very good. You learned it the other way around. So let me see if I don't think I have a biography sketched of all the Moshe Kalim in the Shulchan Aruch. I don't know if I have it on me. I should know it in my head, but I don't. I don't have it on me, but I'll bring it next time. Be'ez Hashem. I have a biographical sketch of every Moshe Kalim. Okay. So now before we move on from this point, we have another question to ask. What about a mumar, a renegade Jew, a Jew who does not keep Judaism, a Friday? Okay, what about them?
You're not allowed to cook. That's what I start talking about. Cooking.
So, what about them? So, what would you say?
I can deal with them, but you can't.
Give me a reason to be mater. Give me a reason to be mater the food baked by a Jew who is a move.
Not what the public.
Very good. And say more. So we saw already Arabs now can come in and they still are also married. Okay. You're going into your Bia Omer there with Shabbat. Let's not look at Shabbat for a second. Let's think of one more point.
He doesn't have to convert.
So say good. So what happens? Can you marry his daughter? Yes. Remember the whole thing is Meshum Hatnut. Let's say his daughter's a good girl.
Yeah.
Can you marry her?
Yes.
Yeah, because she's Jewish. So there is no Isser of Chatnut, of intermarriage, not intermarriage. She's Jewish. So because of that, they want to matter the cooking of the baking of a Jew, a mumar. And he says over here, Let's take a look at this.
Muma who knows and
Okay.
typically goes against it.
Right. So we have that also. So you have a mumar who doesn't keep Judaism because he's what's known as a tzinik shenishba, that he was captured. He doesn't know, right? That applies to a lot of Jews out of the Soviet Union and other countries where they were forbidden to learn Torah. So they don't know, and it's very hard to teach an old dog new tricks and then tell him to change his life and stuff like that. So they're known as tzinik shenishba. So no one really argues on that. I think even the Chazon Ish would permit a mumar that that was considered a tzinik shenishba. Right. So that's a Chazon Ish. He says that that's okay. His wine and bread are permitted, but he says the Chazon Ish adds, if they attempted to mekarev him, they wanted to give him kiruv, make him call, and he refused, he's considered a mumar, and you can't eat his stuff. The Chazon Ish says a mumar you can't eat his bread. He takes that higher approach, and he says tzinik shenishba is okay, but if you try to mekarev him and he didn't, then you can't eat his stuff anymore. The Igros Moshe Feinstein, and he says, based on what the kula that we wanted to say, there's no Isser of Chatnut there. There's no Isser of marrying a Mumar's daughter. She's Jewish. He might not be religious, right? But she is Jewish, and if she is a good girl, you can marry her. So therefore, there's no Isser of Chatnut. Therefore, the bread would be permissible. Okay, so we'll take a look over here in the Yalkut Yosef. It's interesting. The Yalkut Yosef, if you take the Kitur Shulchan Aruch, he has more halachot in there than he has in the at least. So it's a very good question, and that's what Rav David Cohen here deals with that issue. So he writes, very good. You wrote this up. So he writes over here. So Rav Belsky said this entire discussion is almost completely moot. He says there's nothing to talk about. We've been discussing whether bread baked by mummer is or is not forbidden, but it's obvious that the mummer cannot be trusted on kashrus issues, right? Many of us Jews from the Soviet Union, former Soviet Union, they might respect religion, but they don't keep it themselves. And sometimes something's not there. Chai, my last, no one's looking. It's okay, just put it. We need to make the bread or something like that, right? So there's an issue there, right? It's true, okay? Like there was a big problem years ago in Queens and in Brooklyn in the Hawaiian bakeries that on the last day of Pesach, right? They know all the Jews want to come and eat bread, so they started baking bread on 8th day of Pesach. They had the same problem also in some of their pizza shops and stuff like that. They came in and they started doing that. Freeze it and then sell it to the guy and buy it back. Yeah. It's not fresh. So Rav Belsky says this whole talk of a mumar, his bread is okay, according to the Igros Moshe, and we see Yalkut Yosef also says that way. It's only if you can assure that he's using kosher ingredients. Okay, so that's similar to the pas palter as well today, right? When we eat pas palter, bread of a non-Jewish baker, we have to have ashgacha on it. But that goes back to what we said in the beginning. In the olden days, bread was flour, water, salt, eggs, everything that was kosher ingredients. So there was a chazaka that it was kosher. Today, bread is made with a lot of different things. Right? Take a look at any of the bread bag in the back. It's got like 100 different ingredients. So you need to make sure they're kosher. So Belsky says, very good. Isaac said that you need this whole discussion of a mumar is if you can ascertain that he is a you can ascertain he's using kosher ingredients, which would mean he'll need a hashgacha. It's a Jewish bakery, a mumar's Jewish bakery, and he has a hashgacha. That's maybe the discussion of over here that we're talking about.
Even a kosher bakery,
they do give.
Right.
They do give.
But then they
right. In the end of the day, that's the way the Ashkenazim give hashgachas. They give it even to a non-Jewish bakery. That is true. How far do we go with that? Different hashgachot would go different levels. Some will give to everything they make. Some will do if they just package it and certain things like that. It really depends. Like if you go to the Costco bakery, right? Costco has it says it's a kosher bakery, and it's by the Chav K, right? It's it's very hard to people always think it's always okay. Like, and I was also like that at some point. Like, it's okay, it's kosher. Hey, it's on the rabbi's head. Once you start learning halakha, you realize first of all now there's an issue of yashan, right? So we Sephardim should try our best to keep yashan, right? No matter if it's or not, we should try to or not. We should try to keep yashan. So you have a problem of yashan. Then everything there is chalav stam, right? It's all OKD, right? Now chalav stam is another issue, right? So you're dealing with multiple issues at the same time.
So they have Masgir.
I don't know how they do it. You have to go in and find out. I'm not sure. So I mentioned this last part. The Yabia Omer, he brings that over here. He says that there are two different types of a mumar. Besides the Tinik Shanishba, there's two different types of mumar. There's a mumar la'avodah zara, and there's a mumar l'mechal Shabbos. A mumar la'avodah zara, someone who's a Jew and serves avodah zara, believes in another religion now. A Jew who took on another religion, or a Jew who just doesn't keep Shabbos. So Chamavadia wants to say that the mumar l'chal Shabbos, his bread's okay. But if it's a mumar l'avodah zara, then his bread is not okay. He's worse. Why would that be? Logically think about it for a second. Because he's kind of like there's a Tinik Shanishba, he doesn't know, right? And then there's a Michal Shabbos, he doesn't care, right? You may know, but he doesn't care. And then there's Mul Avodah Zara, meaning I went out and took something else on. That's really bad, right? That's a whole nother level. So he wants to be Mechalik there. So why wants to be Mechalik between the Mul Avodah Zara and the Michal Shabbos, right? Yeah, that's really bad. Okay, so that deals on the topic of a mumar. Continues the Shulchan Aruch, and the Shulchan Aruch says, "Huloi asru," and the Chachamim, when they made this gezerah of pas akum, you're not allowed to eat the bread of goyim, elapat shel chamishat mine dogon, just the bread made out of the 5 species of grain. What are the 5 species of grain? Wheat, barley, rye, spelt, and oats. Very good. So those are the 5 grains. Not rice. Not rice. And what would be the reason? So you take a look at the Taz. The Taz says El Pachel Chamishat Shazehu Davar Choshev, because these are important breads. Umevi Lidei Kiruv Das, and it brings people close together. Like, you know, sharing a rice cake is not going to get someone to be your friend so much, right? Rice cake or something like that. It's very bland and whatever. But sharing a nice loaf, which you can put spreads on it and stuff like that, that is what can bring people together. All right. So now you know if you're making a party, you gotta get good bread, not the rice bread, and not the potato bread.
Do they have in Israel? Do they have rice at all?
Back in the day, yeah, Orez, they had Orez. I mean, if you teach, yes, yeah. The Gemara talks about Orez. The question is Orez in the Gemara actually rice? That's another question. It might be millet, all right? And millet's a different type of grain, but it's not. That's a question throughout the Gemara. Whenever it says Orez, does it actually mean rice? Halacha, today we say Orez means rice. That's why we make a mizon in it and stuff like that. We mentioned the Rav Moshe, because of the suffix, if Orez actually means rice or not, would not say a mazonas on rice, and he would eat a cookie, make a mizonot, and then he would make a hadama on something else, and then eat rice, just because Orez might not actually be rice, right? That's also by interesting is just something similar to this is silka, right? Silka in the Gemara a lot of times bring a silka. We say is we translated beets. Chamavadia was of the opinion it's not beets. I'm just talking, and he's talking throughout Shas. It's never beets. He says it's spinach. There are those who say that silka is not spinach or beets, which actually Swiss chard. My understanding, Swiss chard is the leaves of the beets, which look like spinach. That's my understanding of how it all got confused.
Actually, our Siddur says leaves of the beets.
Leaves of the beets, right? That's Swiss chard. And Swiss chard looks similar to spinach. So I'm not sure how everyone took their opinion, But so what we do on Rosh Hashanah night now, in my house at least, we eat both spinach and beets for Silka. No, we don't. We never had the beginning of the switch chart, but Chavavat says to use spinach. So out that we use the spinach because everyone loves lab lavu. You need to have your beets. So we have it.
Beet or this leaf?
No, the beet itself.
beet itself.
Yeah, the beet itself. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, so he says. So again, this shows you the gezerah, how far the Chachamim went. They made criterias of when Pas Akum applies and when it doesn't apply. It applies with the Chamisha Mini Dog, but a 5 species of grain. That's when it applies. Doesn't apply elsewhere. Says the Vishil Oiras and either rice or millet bread. Enu Bichlal Pat Stam She'asru. That is not bread that the Chachamim made usher. Says the Ramah. The gam enu aser, and you should also know it's not aser mishum bishul of day kachavim. Okay, what is the Ramah trying to tell you at this point? The Ramah is saying you're right. It's not bread. Rice bread is not considered bread for this iser. If a guy makes rice bread, a Jew can eat it as long as we know it's all kosher ingredients. They have a hashgacha, right? Today, when you eat the hashgacha, or you can ascertain they have kosher ingredients, you can eat it. The Ramah says you have to, before you can eat it, you have to think one more step. Now it's not bread. Is it considered a cooked food of a guy? Is it bishul akum? Right? Because there's pas akum, bread of a guy, and then there is cooked foods of a guy that are usher.
Is there a difference between baking and cooking?
Yes, 100%.
So
Because I'll tell you the difference, and it's a very important difference to know. For Sfaradim, for sure, this difference exists. For Ashkenazim, they're a little bit different in how the Ramah understands this difference. But for us, Pas akum, bread, you can be matir it. We're going to see shortly, not today, but you can be matir with throwing in a piece of wood. You can matir it by turning up the fire. You can be matir by putting in the bread. As long as a Jew did one of those actions, we'll see in the Shulchan Aruch Beferish how to do this action, it becomes considered Pat Yisrael. But the Shulchan Aruch, Rav Yosef Karo says Beferish, that does not help by Bishul Akum. It does not help by cooked foods. That's why we say the guy turning on the fire on the stove to cook the foods is not considered Bishul Yisrael. The Ramah gives a kula and says a fire turned on by a Jew makes everything, just like bread makes everything mutter, it also makes food everything mutter. We don't hold of that kula. So for us, it's a very big difference between pas and that. That's why an Ashkenazic hashgacha on a pizza shop is very good for a Sephardic Jew, right? Because we hold the same way to make Pat Yisrael, right, is the same for the Ashkenazic Jew and the Sephardic Jew. Just the fire has the oven has to be turned on by a Jew. For us too, for the bread to be considered Pat Yisrael. Pizza is made of a chamisha mini dagan. It's made of one of the 5 species, right, of grain. So it's considered bread, and therefore it's considered Pat Yisrael. But now if you walk into the next restaurant where they're now serving food, cooked dishes, not bread, and they say Bishul Yisrael, Ashkenazic hashgacha, it's not necessarily Bishul Yisrael for Sfaradim, right? That's why in Lafa Bar and Grill, they write Bishul Yisrael is available upon request, right? Right. So you say, can a Shomer Shabbos a person can have Shomer Shabbos meal, like whatever I order, Shomer Shabbos, the guy should put it on the fire. So usually the mashgiach or the owner would go and he would place the food onto the fire. That's what the Shulchan Aruch says has to be done in order to be considered Bishul Yisrael. How long does it have to be on the fire before the guy can take it and pick it back up? We'll deal with that later on when we get into Bishul Akum. But that is a big difference for us. So the Ramah says you have to think, if it's not pas, is it a problem of Bishul? So the Ramah says it's not a problem of Bishul over here. Why? Because when it comes to Bishul, cooking of a non-Jew, there are 2 things you have to look like. We mentioned these already too. What are these 2 things? Can this item be eaten raw? If it can be eaten raw, it never goes on the status of Bishul Akum. For example, you can eat a carrot raw. You can eat a tomato raw. So now if the guy came and cooked the carrot, or he cooked the tomato, you can eat it. It's not a problem. And making sure everything else is kosher. The grill is kosher. Everything else is kosher. The guy did it. It's not a problem of Bishul Akum because you can eat those things raw. The second thing it has to be what's called Oila al Shulchan Malach. It has to be able to be a food that's important enough to go on a banquet table. Al Shulchan Aruch means the king's table. The way we understand that, the halacha is it will go on a festive table, meaning if I go to a wedding, will I see this item on the table? So questions such as potato chips, popcorn, are those things considered banquet food or not?
It depends which banquet.
Right. If you go to Trump's White House and he had all these type of fast foods, maybe you have to deal with that. Right. And also, by the way, Oila Shulchan Malachim, interesting how this halacha really goes with the location you're in. Right. And people, for example, we had this discussion in Shir with Rav Shankulevsky was, let's say shawarma or falafel, right? In the Middle East, like in Israel, it's really like a street food. It's not something that that's necessarily fancy and stuff like that. But here in America, some of the fancy restaurants, Jewish restaurants, they make a whole thing out of it. You go to right, and you order a shawarma, comes in a nice big plate. They give you this little quarter pitas, right? And they give you different sauces and stuff like that. Maybe at this point, shawarma in America might be considered oila shulchan malachim and will be a problem of bishlaka. But if you go to Eretz Yisrael, it's not. So you really have to know the locale that you're in. And it's many things like that. There might be stuff in England that they would put on a festive table, on a banquet table, that they don't put in America. So it really depends on where you are at that time. So that's something to keep in the back of the mind of oila al shulchan malachim. So what about rice bread and millet bread? So says the Ramah, it's not also because of cooking of a guy. Why? Because you usually don't put rice bread on the table on it's not a type of grain. You can Google it.
It's not part of the pie.
No. It's another type of thing they would sometimes make bread out of. So he says these two are not brought out on the king's table. You don't bring it on a festive table. If I go to a wedding and I'm paying, how much we're paying now? $350 for a seat? $450?
What?
I don't know. How much is it now?
I don't know.
Yosef, how much you're paying for a wedding seat? He doesn't know anymore. $350. He just made a wedding. How much are you paying? Okay, so I'm paying $350 for a wedding seat. I better not be served rice bread. I tell you that right now. You better give me real bread there.
No, because certain grains were considered to be
superior
animal food.
Right. But what? Okay, so when you go to Yosef's wedding, it's $550. Don't forget.
That's your wedding, 5:30. Kids, huh? Your kids.
This is Hashem. Okay, fine. That concludes. Sif Aleph.
That's ridiculous.
That concludes Sif Aleph of the Shulchan Aruch. And Siman
No,
Kuf.
350, okay, I already accepted. 350?
I said it's too expensive, 250.
No, I accepted already. Okay, got down. Okay, but 350?
Yeah. What did you think? This is where we are now. Okay. All right. Now, before we move on, just want to read some of the halachot that we talked about in the Yalkut Yosef Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. He writes over here, so I think it's only one over here. 8. Okay. He says over here. All right. Listening? Says the Yalkut Yosef. This is Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. If you want to take one down, you can take one look inside as well. Chelik Beit. And interesting, like I mentioned before, this is not an actual Yalkut Yosef. It's just in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. So there's some halachot that he, I guess, didn't get through yet into the big books. But here he writes as follows: Yisrael hamachal Shabbos b'far Hesya. The Jew is profane Shabbat in public. Afal pisha dinu ka'akum, even though he's considered like a goy. K'moshe Kosev Rambam. Pita muteris. His bread is still muter, right? And that's remember, because Chacham Avadji made a distinction between a mumar lavodah zara and a mumar l'chal Shabbat. Kiven she'ein bo iser chatnut, because there's no iser marrying his daughter. She'ein bito shomeret Torah u'mitzvah v'yesh ba yirat shamayim muter linaseh lebar Yisrael. Since if his daughter is a good girl and she's shomet Torah mitzvot, so then it's proper to marry her. You can marry her. Hilkach pat shafal atzmoy uga shafal atzmoy muteret lekol Yisrael. Even if he cooks it for himself, and we're going to see what he means by this as we learn, continue in the Shulchan Aruch. But it's mutter for everyone because it's not considered guy's bread. Okay, so that is one halakha that we saw over here. All right, let's now move on to the next sif here in the Shulchan Aruch. What? Just tell me the time. Okay, fine. Says the Shulchan Aruch, and we're going to have to deal with this. I'm going to go through the steps of the Talmud and the Rishonim to figure out what is happening here in the sif. But let's read the sif first. Yesh mekomot, says Rabbi Yosef Karoi, says the Moran Shulchan Aruch, Yesh mekomot shemekilin badavar. There are some places that are lenient in this, but loikchim pat menachtom, and they take bread from a baker, ha'ovid kachavim, a goyish, a baker. B'makom she'ein sham nachtom Yisrael, where you don't have a Jewish baker, mipnei shehi she'at hatchak, because it's considered a pressing moment. Bread, even today, is a staple food. Okay? You can tell yourself when you eat food with the bread, you feel more full. And when you don't eat with the bread, you don't feel so full. Right? It's a staple food, even though people's diets today may have changed. They try to stay away from bread. Right? It gets you fatter and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, bread is very important. All right? If you have a family and you want to send off lunches to school, you have rye bread, you're able to smear on cream cheese or this or that. Right? So bread is a very important thing. So in a Shat HaChak, says the Shulchan Aruch, when you don't have other bread, you need bread. So you can take it from a Gaisha baker, as long as we know the ingredients are kosher. Again, all this is under the assumption the ingredients are kosher. So then you can take it from a Gaisha baker. What about Chatnut? What would be the reason not to be worried about assimilation here? But the whole thing is a problem of marrying.
This is a store.
So explain it. Store.
Bakery.
So
Public place.
Very good. It's not so personal.
Right.
The socialization isn't there.
In and out.
I'm buying it and I'm going. I don't care. Charlie's standing behind the thing. I want bread and I'm out of there. Right? So there might be room for leniency. So yeah, as long as we know it's kosher. Today, that would mean that the store has an hashgacha, right? That means that, for example, if you go into Stop and Shop and you take breads, or you go into the kosher bakeries, they have breads and they have hashgachas on them. KVH, they have this, OU, they have OK, Cupcake. Now you go to Costco, you have the buns, for burgers and hot dogs. You get like for $2.99 or something, 16 pieces, right? And it's a very good deal, right? No, the non-potato one. They have a wheat one. Yeah, the non-potato. So that would be a case of you just buying it and going. You're not what's it called, schmoozing with the Costco worker. He didn't even make that bread, right? So maybe that's the reason. And we'll see the Rashba. We'll see. That is the reason. But let's see. It says now. This is the clincher over here. This is what we're going to have to deal with. The Ramah, which Ashkenazim follow, right? The Shach is going to take the Shulchan Aruch's side more in this, but says the Ramah, the Yesh Amrim, Da'afilu b'makom shepat Yisrael matzui, even when you have Pat Yisrael, Shari, it's still permissible to buy bread made by a non-Jewish baker. So you have here a machloket. Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah. The Shulchan Aruch says you have to take bread from a Jew. Unless there's no bread, then you can buy it from a non-Jewish baker. Because it's a Shas Chak, you need bread. It's a pressing situation. The Ramah says you have Pat Yisrael, beautiful. You can still buy and eat pot of a baker.
What about cereal?
So I don't want to answer it right now. Rebelsky has a tshuva on that. Whether it's considered Pat Yisrael, Pas Akum, do you need it to be Pat Yisrael when it comes to cereal? He wants to say it doesn't have tsuras pas, the shape of a pas, and maybe that's why it doesn't need to have. We'll get into that. As Hashem, we'll get into that at a good point. That's a great question. But right now, And you see right after it says Ladata Mordechai. So right now we have to understand where is the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah, where is their machlekes coming from? Why does Shulchan Aruch say you have to buy Jewish bread unless you have no other bread? And the Ramah says you can always buy kosher bread as long as we know it's kosher. Where does that machlokes come from?
It's the original, I guess.
So we have to go as follows. First of all, we said the Chachamim made a gezerah, right? The Chachamim came and made a gezerah and said you cannot eat non-Jewish bread because of chatnut. So if that's the gezerah, then where is the change? Why are we letting these things? The gezerah is the gezerah. Says here the Mishnah. There's a Mishnah in Avodah Zarah on 35b. It says ve'elu dvar shavikachav masurin ve'elu surin eser ana. And chalav shechal avi kachav and yisrael re'ehu, milking a cow and the Jew didn't see it. V'hapat and the bread. V'hashemen shalahen and the oil of them. Rebbe you beis dino hitiru hashemen. Rebbe and his beis din matir shemen. The oil of goyim became mutter. Therefore today you can buy oil, goyish oil, as long as it has hashgacha. Again, they're not putting anything that's not kosher in. It becomes mutar to buy shemen of because they rescinded that gezerah. So now we have to understand.
You're talking about butter?
Oil, real oil, some olive oil, stuff like that. Now, so 1 second. So you have this Mishnah that says pas is us. It says shemen oil was usher of a guy, but then the Chachamim re-allowed it. So there seems to be that Chachamim can make a gezerah and then take it back. Now, is this really true?
Yes.
And when does this have to be done? Can it just be done in the next generation? Or how far does this go? So the Gemara first asks, why did they do this? Only gezerot. So we already answered, Mishum Chatnut, because of intermarriage. Now, what we have to understand is as follows.
How does bread get
There is another time that the gezerah Chachamim make doesn't stick. There's a time when the Chachamim, the sages, make a decree, and the decree doesn't stick. When is that? En gozerin gezerah la tzibor el imkein rov tzibor yochalin la'amod. The only time you can make a decree is if most people can handle that decree. Okay? Sometimes, lahavdil, it's not really what we're getting into here, but just to show you how this is applicable. Sometimes people come over to me and say, Rabbi, why don't you say this in the shul? Or why don't you tell everybody to do this in the shul? And a lot of times the reason why I don't do these things is because I feel if I say it, people are just not going to do it anyway. And I was taught early on, about 7, 8 years ago, I was living in Regal Park, and the Erev came down, Erev Shabbat. And there were people still carrying outside. And the question really was, tell them or not to tell them?
It happened here.
Tell them or not to tell them?
Yeah.
So I was about to run over and tell somebody, Erev, it's not Erev, you gotta, And then Rabbi Bloom, Rabbi Bloom from the Ashkenaz shul over there, he sees me, he says, what are you doing? So I'm about to tell this guy that there's no Erev. He says, you can't tell him. So why not? He says, if you tell him, he's probably carrying expensive stuff or something like that. He's not going to listen to you anyway, right? Right now, he thinks it's an Erev. So he's mistaken. But now if you're going to tell him and he's not going to do it, it's even worse because you told him and now he's doing it. So you have to know sometimes when to say something and when not to say something. It's a delicate balance, right? We went through this in the Shir of Avram Avinu, Yishmael, and Yitzchak. We've talked about this many times. There's a show on the Parsha Shirs on Thursday. We'll get back into that. But for right now, the Gemara tells us that if the gezerah that the people cannot hold by is not a gezerah. It's not a gezerah. So now, right, it's something that can't stick. People can't do it. Apparently it sticks, right? Monogamy is already in session. Okay. Now, there is a Gemara in Maseches Avodah Zarah that tells us that people thought the Yehuda Nasi mattered pas of goyim, the bread of the goyim. People thought Rebbe came somewhere and was like, "Why is there no baker here?" And everyone said, "Oh, he means the Goyish baker is mutter." And then he's like, "No, I meant a Jewish baker." And then another story is like he was like, "Why? Oh, it's such a beautiful piece of bread. Why did they make it also?" Right? So people are like, "Oh, you see, he mattered it." He's like, "No, I didn't matter it." Why didn't you matter it? So Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says because if Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya, I believe it was, he said because if I matter it, then everyone's going to say my bet din matters everything. We mattered shemen, and now we mattered bread also. We just say, the rabbi who lets everything go. So we can't do that, right? So Tosfot says there, midikamer patlo hutra bebetin mekladi boyav b'sharele. That maybe you could have. Amal pashas yisar. He says, "Umikan samcho ata leechol pachal kechavim kibim shlei pashas isra b'chol Yisrael." So says Tosfot, from the fact that we see that they thought Rebbe would have allowed that he would have allowed it, that means that it could have been allowed. And why is that? Because it didn't spread out. It didn't spread out to everywhere. And the Mordechai goes with this too. Says the Beit Yosef, and Nira, Medivra Mordechai, the people makom shepachal Yisrael mitzuyim mutter, the kivan shaloi pashat ha'isur b'mekotenu and tzarich le'manot u'latiro. He says, since it didn't get to these places, Mordechai's talking about Germany and Poland and these places, it definitely didn't get there. Therefore, the Gezerah never came here, and we don't have to hold of it, and therefore it's mutter. So that's the way the Tosfot and the Mordechai understand it, and that's the way the Ramah goes. That's why the Ramah says bread of a Gaisha baker is mutter always. Now, the Ramah, by the way, is not completely like the Mordechai, because the Mordechai says the whole Gezerah of Pat Akum didn't come. That means even pot of a balabayit, even the home baker, not a guy who made homemade bread. We're going to see the difference between homemade bread and a baker's bread, because a baker's bread, we talk, there's no socialization. Homemaker, there is socialization more. So the Mordechai and Tosfot seems to be saying it never spread. So there's no Gezer Pat Akum at all. You can even buy a homemade bread. But yeah. So the Mordechai says it never went anywhere. So if it didn't go anywhere, there's no Gezer Pat Akum at all. The Ramah seems to be taking that middle approach, meaning like I'm agreeing with the Mordechai, it didn't go everywhere, but let's keep the spirit of the law, and the homemade bread should still be usher. All right, so that's the Ramah. The Ramah kind of takes that middle ground, not completely the Mordechai, but in the middle. The Shach goes through that.
What do we hold like?
What do we hold like? Okay, let's continue. So now the question is, what about the Shulchan Aruch? Because he's saying the only time it's mutter, it's when there isn't any. So what's this based on? So this is a Rashba. The Rashba, and this is also based on Yerushalmi, also the way Rav Chelbo in the Gemara seems we can learn that way. That what Rabbi Chelbo, that he says the Chol Heicha Deleka Pati Yisrael Mutter Likach Mipalter Ovid Gululim. So based on our Gemara in the Bavli and based on the Yerushalmi, we want to say that there is a shita in our Gemara that says if there is no Jewish baker, no one has bread, then it becomes permissible to eat the bread of a non-Jewish baker. Only then. And that's the shita of the Rashba. And that is the shita of the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch shita is that of the Rashba, saying that only when you don't have, then you can take a non-Jewish baker's bread. You should know the Rambam is not that clear on this. The Rambam doesn't seem to be going with this Rashba, and the Shulchan Aruch does not paskin like the Rambam over here. The Rambam seems to be of the opinion that it's always usher, that a guy's bread, here he writes over here, Rambam holds that except in specific unusual cases, and the case we're going to see it in a moment, is when you don't have bread for 3 days. The Rambam says if you don't have bread for 3 days, 24 hours, no bread, then you can buy Gaisha bread. Otherwise, the Rambam says Pat Akum is the fact exactly as it originally was. So the Rambam Shita was, the Gezerah was, that everyone was able to accept it. And it did go everywhere. And therefore it's usher everywhere. Okay? The Rashba says the Gezerah was as long as you have Jewish bread available. You don't have Jewish bread available, then you can take non-Jewish bakery bread. That's the Rashba, that's the Shulchan Aruch. And then you have the Mordechai, who says it was too difficult. The Chachamim backed it up. Didn't go everywhere, and therefore it's mutter. And that's what the Ashkenazim go with. No. The Mordechai Rishon. Okay. Now, halacha l'maaseh. Halacha l'maaseh. Okay, before we go into the halacha l'maaseh for us, let's just finish up this sin. Says the Shulchan Aruch, avapache bali batim, homemade bread, and sham mishum mareh bala hakel sheikara gezerah mishum hatnut, v'im yachal pat bali batim yavol lisod etzlam. He says, Shulchan Aruch says, everything we're talking about, shatat chak, and the Ramaz always, that's only, let's talk about the Shulchan Aruch, shatat chak is only bakery bread, not a homemade bread. Because the whole gzera of not eating, because of chatnut, is going to come to socialize and intermarry, so you can never eat a homemade bread. Says the Ramah, what's considered homemade bread? Right?
Baked it at home.
Not necessarily. So take a look in the Ramah. The loy mikri pat bala bayit, it's not considered homemade bread. Elam also beito, it only if he made it for his family. Limchar, but if he made it to sell, meaning he's making a bake sale, right? He's making a bake sale. He's not making it for his house, making a bake sale. So mikre palter, then it's called bakery bread. Even if he's not a regular baker, right? It all goes why he's baking it. V'chein palter, and so to a baker, he's in the bakery and he says, you know what? I need a couple of breads today for home. And he makes it in the bakery, right? Mikre balabai, that's considered homemade bread. So it depends, the intention, it seems to be, it depends on the intention of the guy while he's baking the bread. It depends on what his intention is. Okay, now, the Shach goes through explaining the Mordechai and saying that the Mordechai holds that it spread everywhere, and therefore it's mutter. He explains that the Ramah takes a middle road between all of this. And then says the Shach that, you know what? That the truth is, you should try all year to eat Pat Yisrael. And if you don't try all year, you should at least do it during Aseret Yemei Tshuva. And they bring down, they should also try on Shabbat to eat Pat Yisrael and Yom Tov to make sure to have Pat Yisrael. Here, if David Cohen wants to say that it should be a lechatchila on Shabbat and Yom Tov to make sure you have Pat Yisrael. You should do everything. You should pass them like the Rambam, he says, for Shabbat and Yom Tov. You should have only Pat Yisrael. Now, what about for us, Faradim? Okay, so you're dealing with Sif Hay. Sif Hay, we're going to see soon, but what he's touching upon is that the Shulchan Aruch himself, and he almost, I don't think any, at least to my knowledge, or my knowledge is very limited, but my Rav that taught me, he says that this is almost nowhere else in Shulchan Aruch, that we have the Shulchan Aruch himself give a heter of when you can buy Goyish bread, even if you have Jewish bread. And the lashon of the Shulchan Aruch is if the guy has better bread. Okay, the guy has better bread, meaning because it's considered shasat chak. It's basically some people are very finicky, right? They need to have real good bread, right? And unfortunately, we always look down on our own Jewish food. Can't be so good. The guy makes it shit, then it's special, right? So Shulchan Aruch says if they have a better mint, a better bread that we don't have, then technically you're allowed to buy it because it's considered shasat chak. Using the Rashba. The Rashba that says you're allowed to buy bread from a guy when there's no other bread. If they have a type of bread that we don't have, now your question is cheaper bread considered better bread? That's already a question we're going to deal with. There is a machloket. Seems to be in here. He brings down, this is a Sephardic say for Hora'ah B'Ra. And he brings over here from Tzedek saying that if it's cheaper, it's considered bread, and therefore it would be permissible to buy cheaper bread from the guy. Chelkas Ben Yamin argues on this, and he says no. It means better in taste and better in texture or something that you don't have. And it's not just in price. When people ask me, I tend to go with the chalkas binyan. I try because I don't feel that the price is so much of a difference. If you tell me it's like $10 difference, then I'll say okay. But if it's $1 or two, which most people waste $1 or two all the time anyway, I don't see why to give a heter to buy a cheaper bread by $1. If the person's really struggling and stuff like that, and he tells me his situation and whatever it is, or I know the situation, it's a different story. We can be on this today. But lechatchila, we should get past Yisrael, and if it's $1 or two difference, you should know that $1 or two difference will make a big difference to your whole life. Because when you eat food that you know is 100% kosher, it's much better for your soul, much better for your body, much better for your life. It's not even tanta mesalev, right? Even though there's a heter and stuff like that, right? We try not to use it unless we need to. That's my personal opinion. But someone would ask you, is it permissible? I would tell them this, Chachas B'Yom says no, but if you really need to, then fine and stuff like that. But we try to always be the best and do what needs to get done. And we'll go into this further on. Now, what about for us Sfaradim? So the Shulchan Aruch is clear, and we passing like the Shulchan Aruch. And that means that we need to make sure that we're eating Pa Israel all the time. Not the Shavan Yom Tov, not the Seret Tshuva, all the time. A person can't get it, that's a Shas Chak, and it's okay to eat Pas Palter, as long as it has Ashgacha, it's okay. If it's a better min, something that you don't have in the Jewish bakery, also you have a heter over there for that. But we shouldn't look for those loopholes. Okay? Now, so one of those questions with the prices, by the way, this is something comes to me every summer. They ask me about those Costco buns, and that's why I brought it up earlier. Those Costco buns, right? So in the summer, you're not dealing with the issue of Yashan, right? Because the issue of Chadash, everything's Yashan. So that factor is already out. So now you're just dealing with Pas Palta. And it's really significantly cheaper to buy those Costco buns. They're like $2, $3 compared to the 8 that you buy for $5, $6 in the Jewish bakery. So if you're having a party and you're getting a bunch of people, it could make a big difference. Okay. Also, a lot of people say the Gaisha buns are much more fluffier, right? And they're softer, and the Jewish ones are a little bit more harder. And so that would be the heter of the Shulchan Aruch right there. That the min is better. It feels better, it tastes better. And that would be that. So if people ask me in the summer, can I buy? I would always say yes, because you have that heter that it's a better texture if you feel that it's better. Okay? Yeah, it has a chapke. Has a chapke.
Question. Bagel goes through two processes. It's boiled, then baked. So
Okay, so bagels or traditional real bagels are on. And you guys work in the kitchens, you know better than me. But I was told by my Rav Machsher, he said that bagels are only temporarily put into water, and it's like for a very short period of time. You throw it in. The point of the bagel, throwing it into the water, is that the crust's on the outside. And the crust is on the outside, they then bake the rest. So it's really considered baked. The reason is you want to make the condensed bread inside to stay in that shell of that crust to make the bagel. So it's not considered cooked, it's considered baked. It has a din of a baked. Yeah. Okay. So let me see what I wrote over here. So we know what we have to do, is that we need to eat Pa Israel all the time. We have to take that and try to do it at all the times. And only if we don't have it, then we can eat halter. It has a shkoch on.
Not having it. Not having it.
So that's a good question. No, Manhattan. Depends where you're in Manhattan. There are plenty of kosher stores in Manhattan. So yeah, if you travel, so this is the thing. People go on vacations. So you should try to arrange that you have kosher food, umahadjan. But if a person finds himself somewhere, business or whatever it is, then he goes to Pennsylvania for the summer, for 2-3 days, right? So I'll say my story. I go to Pennsylvania for the summer. We try to bring bread from New York with us. Okay, we bring a loaf or two. We bring. We stop at Hatzis. Actually, we get some sourdough. We get it cut up. We take it with us. We're good. If we run out, there's a Walmart near. The Walmart has bread, right? So at this point, I don't have an option to get Pat Yisrael anymore. I don't. Where am I getting it from? There's no one. There's no stores there I can buy it from. So at this point, it becomes Shasachak. I need bread. The kids need bread. And yeah, I'm saying that's paspalter. That's Gaisha bread with the hashgacha. That's what we're talking about. Paspalter, not Pat Yisrael. So that would be a time. Yeah, that's a shas. I don't have bread. I'm on a trip. I'm somewhere else. Outside of New York, it's hard to get Pat Yisrael, like commercialized and stuff like that. It is hard. So and that's the part. That's the part that you now in Eretz Yisrael, it's very easy. Everything's pas. K, it means absolutely nothing. You see a K, it doesn't mean anything. Triangle K is problematic because it's, and they're saying, even though he says he's Orthodox, they're saying that it's not. The K on certain cereals are, I think Kellogg's have a K. But the K is not actually a K, it's actually a real hashgacha. They just put a K for whatever reason. So you have to know. But everything except for the cereals, when the K means that the store that the company thinks it's kosher. That's what it means. Yeah, the company wants to say it's kosher. It doesn't mean that it's certified kosher. Right. And they're very biased. And they gave a dova, right? So they want to sell it. So the company thinks it's kosher, so they put a K on it. Okay?
The ingredient is inside.
So basically what those people will not.
No, it's for nobody. It's not kosher. It's not kosher.
Okay?
Okay?
No, say whoever is not Orthodox like us. They see K that they like.
People are not.
Why you not Orthodox?
People who are.
Orthodox.
No, he's saying not like us. Not like us.
No, K today with keto diet.
You what?
The keto diet.
Oh, yeah, they put a K.
Put K.
Yeah. And then from China, they come up with all these
Oh,
fake
yeah.
hashgachot. So a person has to be, you have to really know. You know, in the olden days, it has Hebrew letters, it's kosher. Or, it has an OR, Orthodox rabbi, right? TM, Mashgiach Tamidi, right? You make up all these different things. It's trademark, right? But they trip it around, read it in Hebrew stuff. But you really have to know the food you're eating. Not just, you have to know, first of all, is it kosher or not? Then you have to know the ingredients too. Is it healthy or not? People have to make conscious decisions. We have a guf, we have a body that Hashem gives, we take care of it. We have a spiritual neshama that you have to take care of and making sure you're eating proper kosher. And you have a guf that you have, a body that also needs to be taken care of. So you have to take care of things. Just because something has the Deah Charidut from Yerushalayim and it says kosher on it, it's beautiful. It's the best stuff you can get. But at the same time, is that food any good? Like, do you need to eat that? Is that proper for your body? You have to have both all the time. So you can't just, that's a good shkacha, I can eat it. The Stipler Gaon talked about this already. Right? Stipler Gaon would say that his grandkids would come and they would ask him, is it a good hashgacha, the candy? Is it good hashgacha? He would say, yeah, they just popped it in the mouth. They didn't ask, was it healthy? He talked about this. You have to ask. Is it also healthy? You have to think. Is it healthy for my neshama? Is it healthy for my guf? Right? Okay. Fine. We have a few minutes, so we'll end off with the story of the Taz. Talked about the Taz today, so we'll end off with the story about the Taz. Taz, 30 years old, if I remember correctly, his name was Rav Stegel. And it was during the Gezerot of Tach V'Tat, the pogroms, that the Taz had to leave his city, where he was the Rav. He was famously known for writing the Pirush Shulchan Aruch. And he ended up in a different city. And in that city, nobody knew who he was. Right? Because they didn't have Google and Wikipedia and all these different things. You can just check someone's face, what they look at. Right? Recently, I interviewed someone at work, and he says, I Googled you. On all my videos and my LinkedIn and all these other things. I said, very good. Now I'm going to interview, whatever. So people know who you are today. But in the old days, they didn't have that. You don't know who he was. So he ended up in this city. It looks like every other Erlich Yid. He has a nice beard, face, whatever. And people don't know who he is. And his wife says, listen, why don't you go out? We need money and stuff like that. We have nothing. Tell them who you are. They'll give you a position. He says, no. He says, I want to serve Hashem without all the fanfare, privately. And he says, I'm not going to take any position. I'm just going to daven to Hashem, we'll get something. So his wife is waiting a couple of days. She says, we need money. So he says, okay, I'll go get a job. He goes to the shul's bulletin board, and they have a posting for a shamish in the shul to clean up. So he takes the job. He's starting to clean up, and he sees a sefer. So he puts the broom down, and he opens the sefer. Comes the president of the shul later on in the day, sees the whole shul still a mess. And Taz is sitting there with the sefer. So he fires him. He gave him like 2 pennies and said, you're out. He comes up with his pennies. He comes to his wife, this is what I have. So again, I go a few days. He meets one of his talmidim. His talmidim says, Rabbi, what are you? He says, don't tell anybody who I am. Continues. Eventually, he says, I need to get a job. My wife says, I need a job. So he went to the slaughterhouse. He said, I'll become a menakir. I'll take off the fats, the gidanosh, and all these things that are also to eat. The fats that are also, he's going to separate them. He's going to become the guy to do that. So they gave him the job. He started doing it. One day during the shechita, they had a question about the animal kosher or not. So they hitch up on the horse and they take the animal to the rabbi of the town. And the rabbi of the town, unfortunately, wasn't so well versed in Hilchot Shechita. So he had a very easy way to deal with any question. No, that's a different story. He had a very easy way of dealing with any question that came to him with Shechita. Aser, teref. Everything that came was teref. Everything was teref. And they actually called him, they gave him a nickname, Rabbi Terefon. Tarfon? Rabbi Terefon. And everything you came to him was teref. So the Shach is the next day, he sees again they have a question. This time, Taz again sees it again. They have a question about another animal, and he sees they're not going to the rabbi. So he says, why aren't you going to the rabbi? He says, we already know the answers. It's teref. We're just going to throw it out. We're not going to bother. So the Taz takes a look. Kosher. He says, well, you know halachot of shechita? I dabble, right? I know a little bit. So he says, kosher? He says, yeah. Oh, beautiful. They take it and they package it. Okay, selling it. The next day, another question. They say, instead of going to that Rabbi Trefon, we're going to go to the Taz. They answer Taz, Mutter. Beautiful. Goes about a week, 2. Rabbi Trefon now he's like, he says to his Gabbai, what's going on? Where are all the questions? Go find out what's happening at the slaughterhouse. So they go to the slaughter. The Gabbai goes to the slaughter. Says, what's happening? No more questions? They say, we have questions. And what? There's a guy here. He's our menakir, the guy who cleans up the animal. He's baskening. Since when? The Gabbai walks over to the Taz, says, you're answering questions here? He says, no, I'm not answering, but they're asking. Takes him and smacks him in the face. We have a Rav. We have a rabbi in the city and you're answering questions? So the Gabbai takes him and brings him to the Rabbi Trefon, this guy. He says, this is the guy. He's answering questions instead of you. He says, who are you? Where are you coming? That's it. We're putting you in Cherem. They made him sit in the back of the shul, on the entrance over there. Everybody came in, was instructed to spit on him. Everybody came and did all these things to him, the kids and everybody. He was excommunicated. And he doing. Okay. So and that was happening for about a week. Erev Shabbat, a little girl runs into the Beit Midrash of this Rabbi Trefon, and she's holding a chicken in her hand. And she runs into the room of her Trefon and she says, I have this chicken, my mother got it. Question if it's kosher or not. No, Rabbi Trefon takes a good look at it, and what does he say? Today. And this girl leaves the room crying. And the Taz is sitting at the back of the shul. He's been punished. He's in Nidui. He's excommunicated. So he says to the little girl, he says, come here. What happened? She says, the rabbi just paskin that this is teref, and we have nothing else to eat at home. This is the only meal we're going to have. So the Taz takes a look at it. Says kosher. She says, but the rabbi said it also. He says, go into the rabbi, tell him to take down the sefer Turei Zahav, open to this on this page, on this in this paragraph, and you can see it's going to be mutar. She goes inside and she tells the rabbi there, open up this page on this book, on this line, it says it's mutar. He says, what? Takes the book down, he has the book, takes it down, reads it, says, it's mutar. He says, wait, come here. And she starts running out of the room. He says, come back. She says, I'm not coming back. I don't want you to switch your mind. You said it's mutar, I'm out of here. He says, no, you're coming right now. Who told you? She says, you know who told me? The guy sitting over there that everyone's spitting on. So he says to the Taz, he says, come here. As the Rav of the city, the Mara De'atra, I am commanding you to reveal who you are. He says, well, if the Rav of the city is commanding who you are, you should know that I'm the author of the Taz. And the guy fainted. That's my story. The guy fainted. And the Rav did the right thing. He said, you are now the Rav, and I will be your Talmud. And the question the people had for the Taz was, the whole time you were quiet, and you never said who you are. And now all of a sudden, you said right at the last moment, what happened here? The Taz says there's a big difference. He said, for me to deal with it, it's one thing. But this little girl didn't have any food. And her tears was worth it for me to reveal who I am. So this way, this girl won't cry anymore. I think that's our job all the time as Jews, to feel the other person and what we can do for them and how we can relieve their pain and suffering. Hashem, when we do that, Hashem will give us the Geulah Shleimah Me'er B'Yameinu. Everyone who's captured will be returned healthy and sound.
Amen.
Amen. Rabbi Hanina v'kashem v'yatzah HaKadosh Baruch Hu Zakar Yisrael. Lefikach Yibra Lahem Torah Mitzvah Shneimah Adonai Chafetz L'ma'an Tzidko Yagdil Torah V'Yadir.
Amen.